After putting a significant amount of time into Battlefield 6, I've put together 73 tips that you must know that will instantly improve your gameplay. These range from simple settings that you can change to ways you can abuse gameplay mechanics to get a huge advantage over your opponents. I'll also be breaking this video into different segments to help you with specific parts of your gameplay to make it as easy to follow as possible. And if you do find any of these tips helpful, please hit the subscribe button as we push towards 700,000 subscribers. Hitting your shots in Battlefield 6 has been one of the most discussed topics, with Bloom adding random bullet deviation. To help counter this, you'll want to make sure that you're tap firing, so the Bloom effect isn't as strong. But keep in mind, if you're strafing while shooting, you will still see some random bullet deviation even whilst doing this tip. Next, something a lot of players don't know is all weapons in Battlefield 6 other than sniper rifles are zeroed to 50 meters, meaning at very close range, you need to aim lower than intended or your bullets will fly over your opponent's head. Next, one of the biggest tips to improve your gameplay in Battlefield 6 is to focus on your centering. All this is keeping your crosshair aimed at where an enemy is most likely to appear, usually at head or chest height at all times, even before you see them. You can work at improving this by just consciously being aware of where your crosshairs are at all time. Try keeping them pointed towards doorways or corners that enemies are most likely going to appear, and before you know it, you'll be doing it without thinking about it. One of the most significant improvements I've had to my gameplay in Battlefield 6 is to hipfire more. With high fire rate weapons like the M4A1 or the MP5, hipfiring up close destroys the enemy, especially inside of buildings or when fighting over a close bit of cover like a giant rock. Battlefield 6 has a ton of optics for you to choose from, but choosing the best one will give you a far clearer image and give you the ability to land your shots far easier. One of the best ones available for any medium to long range weapon is the ROM 1.75X, which you'll see a lot of the pros using. However, on SMGs, rocking iron sights is the way to go. Just check out the PW5A3, aka the MP5. It is so clean, and it also has the cheapest attachment point option for you, giving you more points to spend elsewhere on your loadout. My next tip, and probably one of the biggest mistakes I see people making, is don't get caught sprinting around a corner. With how fast you get killed in Battlefield 6, get into the habit of coming out of sprint as you reach a corner and go round it centering your crosshairs to check that someone isn't there waiting. And if they are, you'll be ready to start hip firing or shooting straight away. One thing you'll find is that most players run around in their squad. So if you're on an objective, laying in a corner by a door, sometimes you don't want to start shooting as soon as someone runs past you. A lot of the time, because you're in prone, they won't spot you because a red dot won't appear above your head, and their teammates will just blindly follow, giving you the opportunity to shoot multiple enemies in the back. It's a bit dirty, but it does work. And that's another big tip. When going prone, especially if you're playing as a Spec Ops Recon, you will be considered out of combat faster and will be harder to spot, meaning players are more likely to completely miss you, as they'll be chasing red dots above player heads. My next tip to help make you better at Battlefield 6 is play to fill the space. If you see a teammate push into a building, don't follow their exact route. Try and spread out and occupy and clear more space, as this will help make sure that there aren't any enemies hiding in a corner or a room. If at times you're struggling to hit your opponents, try lowering your sensitivity. I, for example, play on a 35. This allows me to make those small micro adjustments without overextending past my target all the time. Remember, high sensitivity allows you to be more reactive, but lower gives you far better control. Another big tip is knowing that when you're standing, crouching, or laying prone, your weapon has a different recoil pattern. Standing will have the widest variety and be the most difficult to control. If you crouch, you'll get less recoil, and then when prone, you'll have the smallest amount, perfect for taking out targets at a long distance. Just remember, you have less mobility the further down you go. Next, when making your way around the map, one of the most effective ways of making yourself a hard target to hit is to slide. I don't see people do this enough, but I almost always slide into cover or if I'm getting shot at all the time. It just makes it harder for an enemy to track you properly and is going to help keep you alive. One of the best ways to improve your gameplay in Battlefield 6 is to be aware of the sound that you're making in-game and what that audio could potentially make nearby players do. Because when you start thinking about that, you could be one step ahead of your opponent. If you're shooting out of a second floor window, the odds are a player is going to push your stairs as they come hunting down the shots. Sounds simple, but not enough people think about it. And that leads me onto my next tip. Please wear a headset. This allows you to pinpoint audio so much easier and will give you much better situational awareness, from footstep audio to gunshots to even a tank rolling down the street. Now, if you're wondering what headset to get, I couldn't recommend enough the headset that I use from my partners, HyperX. The brand new HyperX Cloud Alpha 2 Wireless. It has up to 250 hours of battery life, which is incredible, as well as amazing audio quality thanks to 53mm dual chamber drivers. It's honestly the best gaming headset that I've ever used, and you can find the link to it down in the description below. My next biggest tip to help you get better at Battlefield 6 is learn to be patient. If you try to force every engagement, I can guarantee you won't do as well. So if you need to hold a position for an extra 10 seconds to either make the enemy rush you or to wait for your teammates to push up, do it. You'll be surprised at how things start going your way. The next tip is you want to make sure that you learn to keep an eye on your minimap almost at all times. There is so much helpful information that you can use to your advantage. The most obvious being red dots that are enemy players. But you can also tell if someone is trying to flank you because one of your teammates may get killed behind, or an enemy vehicle starts rolling towards you, so you want to get out of the way because you're not an engineer. Either way, try to keep an eye on that minimap as much as possible. Also, when playing Battlefield 6, another way to help you and your team is to constantly mark things. Even if you mark an objective you're trying to capture, you'll earn more score. And if you mark an enemy, it's just going to help your team deal with that threat. Now, if you're Recon, it'll mark enemies automatically when you aim down sight, but otherwise, get into the habit of pressing your left trigger or bumper, depending on your settings, to mark your opponents. But one thing a lot of players don't know is that you can actually use your map to mark enemies or vehicles appearing on it, so you can get a better idea of the exact location, allowing you to make better decisions and get an advantage over them. Something else that does go under the radar are the stationary weapons dotted around the map. These are incredible at taking out vehicles, infantry, and even aircrafts, but people just don't use them enough. Remember, use everything you can to swing the battle in your favor. Now, if you're like me and you play as infantry a lot of the time, you'll know tanks are one of the biggest challenges that you'll face. But it's important to remember that if you're playing as engineer or you're using C4, you'll be able to deal more damage to the vehicle if you hit it from the rear, as it has less armor there. And that leads me onto another great tip. If you're playing as Recon and have C4, you can get really inventive in taking out the enemy team, or even an enemy tank. You can throw C4 onto a car and drive it right at the enemy tank to take it straight down. And trust me, it really does work, and people just never expect it. Now, another very powerful gadget in Battlefield 6 is the Recon drone, especially on attack and defend modes like Breakthrough, where there's a high density of players. But it also has a somewhat secret feature where you can detonate enemy mines with it, meaning you can take players and vehicles out from the safety of your drone, whilst also marking enemy players for your squad to take out. Another huge tip is don't feel like you have to stay on the same class the entire game. If you notice your team is being overrun by tanks, take the initiative and switch to engineer to help take them out. This is one of the most important aspects of Battlefield if you want to consistently do well and win your games. The same goes if you notice no one is playing support and reviving your team. Be the player that swings the battle in your team's favor by switching to the class that your team needs the most. Next, if you're running support, you want to make sure that you're running smoke grenades. This will not only allow you to get more revives off with your defibs, but it will allow you and your team to make pushes that would otherwise be impossible to make. And as you're the only class that can have smokes, if you don't, no one else will. But if you want to counter players that are running smokes, especially on some of the more open maps, you could run a thermal optic on your assault rifle or LMG, which is actually incredibly powerful. It's probably one of the most underrated optics in the entire game. One of the most important tips I can give you to get better at Battlefield 6 is you always want to be playing the objectives. If you're struggling to get score or you're just not finding enough action, quite simply, you're just not playing the objective. But if a single objective is taking too long to capture or it's overpopulated, try and pull off a flank and go to a different flag in Conquest, for example, and you'll find more success. Next, if you want to move around the map quickly on foot, make sure that you pull out your melee weapon to run super fast. Or if you're playing a support, you can pull out your defibs to run even faster. When sniping, make sure that you have a rangefinder attached, and then in your settings, change your hold breath button to be the same as set range on the rangefinder. This means that your sniper will always be zeroed, making it far easier to hit headshots at range. If you didn't already know, snipers in Battlefield 6 have a sweet spot where they'll kill you in one shot to the chest, but it requires you to be in that sniper's sweet spot range. To know if you're in this range, the enemy sniper glint will have a rainbow-like glow around it. So if you see this, get yourself into cover as quickly as possible. Support, once again, is one of the most helpful classes in Battlefield 6, and its deployable cover allows you to dominate key areas of the battlefield or hold flanks that are usually easy pushes. Get into the habit of extending walls to give you firing positions or blocking doorways, and it'll become a lot harder for the enemy team. If you haven't already, make sure to change your melee weapon to the sledgehammer. This is actually incredibly useful and will allow you to break open new routes around the map without the need for an explosive. Now, this isn't essential because they've done a fantastic job with balancing a lot of the weapons in Battlefield 6, but make sure that you're using the best loadouts that you can because it will just give you the edge in any gunfight that you find yourself in. I upload these on the channel on a regular basis, so subscribe if you haven't. Another key tip in Battlefield 6 is to remember, especially with close-range weapons, that suppressors are king. You want to do everything that you can to stay off the minimap because good players will hone in on your red dot to take you down, and the suppressor will stop that from happening. It is an expensive attachment, but worth every penny. My next tip, if your support teammate isn't dropping his ammo bag for whatever reason, you can interact with him and grab ammo from his backpack, which is incredibly useful. Something else players don't do enough is use their special abilities. Make sure to pop them for additional score and to help your team win the game. Another great gadget for support is the trophy system. You can throw these on objectives and it will make them a lot easier to capture. Next, if you get knocked, don't always give up right away, especially on modes with tickets, as you'll be making your team more likely to lose the match. Trust your medics and squad mates to get you up. When choosing which class to play, make sure you also choose the best class training for your playstyle. For example, there's no point using sniper on Recon instead of Spec Ops if you're not using a sniper. Another important thing to improve your Battlefield 6 gameplay is try to never run across open ground. I always try and look at the terrain around me and use bits of the ground or trees to block line of sight to the enemy team as much as possible. It's also another great opportunity to use those smoke grenades that we mentioned earlier. Also, one of the best ways to improve at Battlefield 6 is always be on the lookout for any flanks that you can pull off. Some of the easiest kills that you'll ever get in this game will be when you make your way behind enemy lines. Not only will this help take pressure off any objectives that you're fighting for, but it'll always keep the enemy team second guessing. I'm always able to find the best pushes by checking my minimap to see where my team aren't covering, as if you're surrounded by teammates, it'll be difficult for you to flank around. Next, high ground is king. If you ever get the option to take a high position that is not destructible, take it. One of the biggest reasons for this is you can then control every engagement that you take, whilst making yourself as small a target as possible to your opponent. The top of a hill or certain rooftops will allow you to deal a lot of damage to the enemy team. Another habit you're going to want to develop in Battlefield 6 is always looking for parkour routes that allow you to get strong positions such as windows that players will not expect, or certain hills that are more difficult for enemy players to push. In a lot of first-person shooters, I've always been scared of ziplines, but in Battlefield, they're one of the best ways to take certain positions because you can start hip-firing pretty much instantly as soon as you get to the top, and it definitely catches people off guard. My next tip is there are a few settings that you're definitely going to want to change to get the best Battlefield experience. First of all, go ahead and drop your world brightness down to 40. This means that you're not going to get blinded by the sun as much, where it can be a little bit difficult to spot enemy players. Then you're going to want to turn all the motion blur off. Weapon motion blur to 0, world motion blur to 0, and camera shake down to 50, as well as turning off those post-processing effects. So chromatic aberration, vignette, and film grain, turn those off. Also, if for some crazy reason you haven't, turn vertical sync off. Two other things to turn off, infantry and vehicle HUD motion, you're going to want those off as well. Next, we want to make sure that all the colors on your HUD are popping. So head to color profiles and click edit, then head to color presets and change this to custom. Then to get the best colors possible, you're going to select the primary color and then drag it into the top right to make it pop as much as possible. So player color, we're going to put it to the top right. So all these colors are as vibrant and as easy to spot for you as they can possibly be. Just head through all of these. Like that red makes it going to pop more against the background. Same with that kind of blue. I am colorblind, so this does struggle with me sometimes, but make your way through the menu and turn all of these into the top right-hand corner, and you will get the best looking HUD that you can possibly have. Now, for my next tip, I want to say a big thank you to Westy, as he's the one that made me change these settings. You're going to head to the graphics tab and then scroll down to icons and indicators. You're then going to click edit on HUD icons and scroll to objective icons. Now, objective icons opacity, you're going to set this to 80. This means that if you're playing Conquest and the C flag, for example, it's not going to be as solid and blocking your view whilst playing the game. We then want to drop this even further when you're in ADS. So you're going to drop objective icons opacity down to 40, and then also objective icons opacity occluded down to 20. This is just going to make it so much easier for you to see in Battlefield 6. Now, we're not done because you're also going to want to change these settings. Friendly icon scale is going to be 100, but there is a 60-40 rule. So opacity is going to drop down to 60, and then opacity zoomed is going to go to 40. We're going to continue this throughout the list. So 100, 60, 40. We scroll down to squad icons, 100, 60, 40. And once again, 100, 60, 40. Then we're not going to touch enemy icons. But for neutral icons, once again, 100, 60, 40. And that's all you need to change in this menu. Then finally, for the settings, you're going to want to go to crosshairs and indicators, and we're going to set our crosshair intensity to 85. We're going to turn infantry crosshair projection off. We're then also going to increase our hit indicator intensity to 70, and then change the headshot color to something else so you can tell when you hit a headshot in Battlefield 6, which is incredibly useful information. Actually, one last thing. You're going to want to also go to your advanced HUD settings and set your minimap size to large, as well as playing on a 110 FOV. Also, if you haven't already realized, vehicles transform battles. A single tank can change the outcome of a match because they can completely destroy the majority of players, especially if they don't switch to engineer. Just make sure to keep an eye out for mines. Next, if you're not confident in piloting or driving a vehicle, don't completely ignore them. Hop in the gunner seat, which allows you to deal a lot of damage when combined with an experienced pilot, and you'll get a better idea of how to play the vehicle. You can then get tons of practice in vehicles with test maps via Portal that players have made, and you'll be flying like a Top Gun pilot in no time. Next, if you're struggling to rank up quickly, you can take advantage of XP farm servers in Portal that allow you to get quick XP against bots. You can also use this to finish some of the game's more difficult challenges. It's a bit of a cheat code and won't be surprised to see this patched in the future. And finally, just make sure you practice as much as possible and make sure to subscribe for more Battlefield 6 content.